leading that crew, of course, is Nancy Pelosi, who's just a terrible human being. I mean, really despicable. She said over the last 48 hours that Republicans are trying to cover up George Floyd's murder while they're trying to pass a police reform bill that her colleagues are blocking, at her behest, presumably. She is saying that Republicans are trying to cover up George Floyd's murder, which is insane. Insane. Have you seen a single Republican defending Derek Chauvin? Like, any of them? What the hell is she talking about? But, of course, it's all about the narrative, and the narrative is all about how Republicans are a bunch of evil racists, while Nancy Pelosi is, of course, a godsend, the white woke liberal here to save Black Americans across the board. She was asked about her ridiculous comments yesterday on NBC News, and she said, no, I'm not going to apologize for saying the GOP covered up Floyd's murder, which is nuts. Nuts. Derek Chauvin is going to be tried by Keith Ellison in a Democratic state with a Democratic mayor of Minneapolis with a Democratic AG.
When you were speaking yesterday, you said that Republicans are, quote, trying to get away with murder, actually, the murder of George Floyd. Senate Republicans are demanding an apology for that statement. Will you apologize?
Absolutely, positively not. The fact is, people say, I think you, frankly, in the press have given them far too much credit for a bill that does nothing. They're saying, well, you have your bill, they have theirs. Yeah, our bill does something, theirs does nothing.
Their bill does nothing, ours does something, therefore they're trying to cover up the murder of George Floyd. I mean, that's despicable stuff. By the way, if you want to talk about changing police behavior in major cities, it might be worthwhile pointing out that every one of these major cities is governed by a Democrat. Every single one. And you know what's easier than passing federal police reform? Having local mayors change police procedures in Democratic areas. This is something Tim Scott pointed out as well. He said, listen, Democrats are talking, we need to change this. We need to do something. Guys, you're in charge of these cities. We've seen riots in Ferguson. We've seen riots in Baltimore. Baltimore is a Democrat city. We've seen riots in Atlanta, Democrat city. We've seen riots in LA, Democrat city. New York, Democrat city. Like, anytime you want, guys, you can make this change, but I don't see you making the change. I just see you demagoguing the issue for political gain, says Republican Tim Scott.
In Detroit, Atlanta, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, all these cities could have banned chokeholds themselves. They could have increased the police reporting themselves. They could have more data information themselves. They could have de-escalation training themselves. They could have duty to intervene themselves. Minneapolis as well. All these communities have been run by Democrats for decades.
Yep. So where are those solutions? Anytime, Bueller. Maybe it wasn't about the solutions. Maybe it was never about the solutions. Maybe it was just about promulgating the narrative that all disparities in American life are due to broad-scale American racism. Then you block the solution, because if you provide a solution, then you can't talk about how America's racist and evil anymore. You'll notice that every time people talk about the evils of American racism and they mention police shootings, they never, ever mention Walter Scott. It is amazing. You will see them talk about how police are wrongfully shooting Black men. And then you'll see them list the names of the victims. And many of these cases are cases that are really, at the very least, tough, right? They'll mention the case of Michael Brown. Michael Brown was justifiably shot by the police. The Department of Justice under Barack Obama found that that was the case. They will mention the Rayshard Brooks case, a case in which a Black man wrestled down two officers, took a taser off one, tased an officer, tried to tase the other one while running away, and then got shot. They'll mention that. Okay, that is a disputed fact pattern at the very least. To say that as a clear-cut case of racist murder is insane and completely disconnected from facts. So they'll talk about that one. They'll talk about Tamir Rice, which is a horrible situation in which a 12-year-old boy was shot by the police after he was going around in a park, and he had a pellet gun, he had a BB gun, but he had sawed off the front of the BB gun, the orange part. Normally when you buy a BB gun, there's an orange part on the front that lets deliberately there, that lets the cops know that this is not an actual gun. They got a call, the police got a call, that there was somebody who was running around the park with an actual gun. They got there, and there was somebody who was running around the park with what appeared to be an actual gun and didn't stop and put down the gun when told to do so. That doesn't mean the shoot was good, but to try and say that that is a racist murder based solely on the race of the 12-year-old child, Tamir Rice, to lump all these things together, right? Those are the disputed cases. Here's an undisputed case. The case of Walter Scott. He never gets mentioned in this litany. It's truly amazing. We'll see this a little bit later when we get to Nicole Hannah-Jones's awful piece on reparations. The attempt to lump all these cases together that have very, very different fact patterns, and then they ignore the one most clear-cut racist case. Why? Because what happened in that case? What happened? The police officer went to jail for murder. So they won't talk about that case. Because in a case where the system worked, they won't talk about it. Because if the system works, you can't indict the system. So instead, you have to pick a case with a variegated fact pattern, with a difficult fact pattern. And then you suggest the system didn't work because in this case, the system is really shown. Not the Walter Scott case, where you have a clear-cut case where a Black man is running away from a police officer unarmed. The officer shoots him in the back and then tries to plant a gun on him. The officer ends up in jail, right? As he should, for murder. right? Walter Scott, it's amazing. If you ever want to know about the bad faith of people who make a lot of these arguments, notice that in the litany of victims of white police violence, Walter Scott never gets mentioned. He never gets mentioned. It's truly an incredible thing. And you have to wonder why. And you really don't have to wonder why, because it's never about the solutions. It's never about fixing the problem. It is always about indicting the system, generally speaking. So Senator Mitch McConnell, he went on the floor yesterday and he said, listen, you guys were the ones who were like, put a bill on the floor. And they were like, okay, we'll put a bill on the floor. And then you refused to even allow us to amend the bill or debate the bill. So it seems to me that you're not super focused on solutions here, guys.
For weeks, Democratic leader has blustered that the Senate simply had to address this issue before July 4th. Well, that's what the vote this morning is about. Are you beginning to see how this game works? 2 weeks ago, it was implied the Senate would have blood on our hands if we didn't take up police reform. Now, Democrats say Senator Scott and 48 other senators have blood on our hands because we are trying to take up police reform.
Correct. By the way, that Pelosi bill is going nowhere. You know why it's not going anywhere? It's not going anywhere because Pelosi's not allowing any amendments to be brought. Nancy Pelosi's committee is not allowing any amendments to be brought on the Democrats' police reform bill, which means it's going absolutely nowhere. The rule provides for 4 hours of debate of bill, no amendments, and then a straight vote. So do you think that bill is going anywhere? The Republicans were offering amendments, and the Democrats blocked it anyway. This is not about solutions. It simply is not about solutions. Thank you for tuning in to the Daily Wire, one of the fastest growing conservative media outlets in the country. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any of our content.